You don't do it in public like I just did. All right, thanks for coming, everyone. We're here doing our Friday Tech Talk. Thanks for coming in early. We're closing today a little bit earlier for the holiday, and we wanted to still bring Cole Dixon, one of our former students and employees at the Tech Academy, to share his experience. I've known Cole for 3 years, and I remember when I first started at Tech Academy, he was my instructor, and learned a lot from him. And then shortly thereafter, I think he got poached by another company in Boulder, Colorado. And with that, I'll let him share his experience and story. So give him a warm welcome to Cole Dixon.
All right. Yeah, I think I'm on camera. I don't know. Okay. Yeah, so I'm Cole. I attended Tech Academy, started in about 2014, I believe. Like very, very early days, back when it was like half a room. There was like 6 desks here. And then halfway through the program, I got invited to become an instructor, and then ended up being the lead instructor here for a while, for about a year or so, maybe a little bit over that. I don't quite remember. And then, yeah, as Michael said, I kind of got poached by another company, a startup in Boulder, Colorado. So I've been down there for about 2.5 years, working in kind of a niche part of the industry. We work in warehouse management. We do a lot of manufacturing software, so it's a lot of equations, figuring stuff out as far as, you know, when it comes to shipping and receiving items. And we code in a main base of .NET is what we're currently working in. We're branching out into web applications. We also have an iOS application where you can manage a warehouse from your phone. And we build that in Node and Angular, and we render that using XAML and JavaScript through an iOS Xamarin platform, which is it's a really neat little tool if you guys are that far in the program yet, working in any sort of web or iOS applications. Kind of wanted to talk about what it's like to go out into the industry, you know, even after your time at Tech Academy, learning everything you know, and how intimidating it actually is to go out and have an interview. I know for some people, if anybody here has actually started doing the interview process, you definitely know that it can be very, intimidating. It kind of, you know, makes you question everything that you've learned, whether or not you actually know enough. I can tell you, coming out of Tech Academy, you definitely do. But the questions that a lot of places are going to ask you is, they're trying to weed out the people specifically that are going to kind of showboat their code, and that's they want to find out whether or not you kind of have the fundamental working knowledge over, you know, you're going to come in and try and do something fancy and shake things up. That's not what companies are usually looking for. Can't speak for all of them. From the companies I interviewed, that kind of was their process. And then, the interview process, as far as I encountered it, was also, there was phone calls. There was a lot of, practical knowledge. I'm not sure if anybody's had any interviews here, but there is the whiteboard test, which is probably the most intimidating part of any sort of interview, where they actually expect you to write your code. And that, you know, when you're not writing your code in an actual IDE or application on your computer, it's very frustrating, because it's not the exact same. You don't have syntax highlighting, you don't have language parameters or anything like that. You're expected to just take a dry erase marker and write a piece of code that looks fundamentally functional. Whether or not it's fundamentally functional, they don't really care about. They just want to see that you have that core knowledge to kind of put a piece of code together. And then from that end of from there, you usually move on to the in-person interview, which everybody here has probably had an interview at any point in their life that's been in person. And from there, you just really need to kind of sell yourself. Most companies are looking for a fit as far as personality, especially in the software industry. Out in Boulder, it's all personality over skill set. A lot of places will definitely want to take on junior devs, because they can take a junior dev that has even a minimal knowledge of what they're actually building, or even their core structure and stack, and they can build you up inside their company. And that's kind of what they're looking for. They want to make sure that you have a personality that's going to blend well with everybody else on the team, and that you're going to be able to identify, you know, maybe even sources of weakness or strong points within the company, and kind of take those on your own. Like, they want to see initiative. And that's definitely something that may be fundamentally different than some other jobs that are currently out there. And then as also within most of the software development style of companies, there is multiple different positions. You could be hired, like for me, I was hired as a junior software developer, but I started off on the support desk for about 3 or 4 months because, it's not what I wanted to do. It almost made me not take the job, but at the same time, I ended up learning the software inside and out. And that was the best possible way to learn that. So, you may be hired on as a junior dev and they tell you that you're going to be doing something else than what you want to do. Don't look down on that, because you will eventually work up to that position. Like, I can't speak for every company, but you will probably work up to the position you were hired for. And it was frustrating having to be, kind of put on the back burner for a while, but knowing that there was something else on the horizon definitely helped. And when it comes to being able to be a good software developer, I would say that debugging, which you would learn from doing any sort of support or QA work while being a junior dev, is going to be one of your greatest assets, because anybody that can debug code can usually write really good code, because you know what to look for, the hiccups that are going to be seen along the way, you're going to know the structure inside and out, especially if it's a database connected structure. So you're going to really know what to kind of look for and how to, pinpoint those problems faster than anybody else that's going to be on the dev team that doesn't know, they may have built the front end side of the application and just handed it over. They've tested it, but they don't fundamentally know exactly what it's doing. So I kind of just wanted to give a brief overview of what I did, and then pretty much just open it up for Q&A, because there's not a whole lot for me to just kind of say about my experience. I would definitely like to be able to give more insight off what you guys are looking for, because I could highlight my entire first almost 3 years in the software industry, but I may not hit on the stuff that you guys are actually looking for. So yeah, with that, I'd definitely hand it over to anyone that has questions.
So can you share a little more about your transition from the support position to the dev position, and also just some seminal moments in your learning process? Because when you start out at Tech Academy, you learn a solid foundation, but you don't know everything. What are some of the things that you did as you're transitioning, to help augment your ability outside of work in order to succeed in that?
Definitely. So when I was at Tech Academy, as most people find, with all the different languages you learn, most people find that one language that speaks to them, that they fall in love with, and it's the one that they want to pursue as their career, which is an awesome thing. For me, it was SQL. I fell in love with databases, database structures, and all of that, and I luckily found a job that deals pretty much in database. We have front-end parts of the application that tie into it. But even with my, what I thought was a really solid knowledge of databases, I was missing a lot, I found, when I went into the field. And I spent a lot of time especially through the support desk and QA, seeing, when you're reading somebody else's code, you learn a lot of tricks along the way. You see how other people approach problem solving. You see the do's and don'ts of the stuff that you code, and you can kind of have something to compare it to, which is really interesting. There's also anything that I encountered that I didn't fully understand. I spent time after hours, or if I, had time in between projects at work, I would be looking it up and trying to figure out, why did they use this there? How does this fully function? And then, where can I use this in my own projects? What is the best application of this piece of code, or this method, or this function that already previously exists? And so that was part of a really good transition. And then also you learn a lot about you'll learn a lot from the mistakes you make, which is something that I've done on multiple occasions. I have what we do a lot at my work is our clients have their production databases, which is directly tied to what they're doing every single day, down to the minute. And occasionally we have to address problems in those production databases. And from there, you could change a single piece of data, and then that person's company is just down immediately. And so there's a lot of stress and a lot of things that, happen around that. And I've made mistakes in production databases that have, probably should have gotten me fired, but luckily they did not. And so you learn a lot of things about your own weaknesses when it comes to how you would approach a problem, and it definitely helps you really pinpoint what you need to do as a developer and the steps that need to be taken. And because with development, I'm not sure how much of you guys actually debug your own code, or how much of you guys just kind of build and run and build and run. You know, there's no wrong approach to stepping through code. My approach has turned into kind of a like a build a piece, you know, test that piece, read over it, and then go back and then place it with all the others. So that way I'm not building an entire application, running it, and finding out that it's breaking in 16 places. I like to build small pieces and then put it all together, kind of just like a puzzle. Figure out what's going to work, and then hopefully at the end the whole application works, which is generally the go-to for me. But yeah, I think that kind of covers the transition for the most part. Yeah, I guess another thing to touch on is I'm not sure how many of you guys have QA backgrounds or are even interested in the QA side of development, which previously, up until now, QA and development have been two different complete categories. They've always been separate departments. At a lot of companies they are, but within the last 5 to 6, maybe even 10 years, there's been this overlap where there's a strong point of QA where you need to fundamentally, if you're going to solve a problem, like devs need to know how to QA, QA needs to know how to do dev work. Not to the full extent, but if you're interested in QA, having the knowledge of being able to debug and step through code that Tech Academy teaches you, and being able to use source control and those kind of functionalities that are very heavy here, is something that will come very important when it comes to being able to actually QA applications. And then same thing with dev. You need to be able to QA your own stuff. Personally, as a dev, I don't like handing something over to QA that I haven't done myself. I know a lot of companies, you have a philosophy of you build it, you hand it to QA, and it goes back and forth. I feel like that's a huge waste of time. You should be able to QA your own application before you ever hand it to anybody else. But, that's just the way my company works. I know a lot of companies work that way, but it would just end up where you land on how it would work. But does anybody else have any questions?
How many people do you work with? Like, how big is your team?
So I work for a relatively small startup. The entire staff itself is probably about 25 people. My team consists of 4 developers, and then we have our CTO, who pretty much ballparks everything and wireframes all our new forward-moving applications. So we have a junior dev who also came from Tech Academy. Then there's me. I'm the lead dev, and then we have a department head, and then we have a senior dev who kind of he's been there for about 6 years, so he can take on any of the really complex roles with any of our other applications. But yeah, we're a pretty small team for how many clients we have. It's we're always looking for like new junior devs, and we'll probably in the next couple of years be hopefully at a team of 10. But yeah, right now it's about 4 with the CTO 5. You got a question? I joined the Tech Academy because I was definitely looking for something new, and I didn't know exactly what I had wanted. I was a barista for a long time, and then I bartended in Portland, and was kind of looking for my next challenge. And I started to look into coding a little bit. It was nothing I'd ever really researched before, but it was something I was kind of interested in. I came in, I saw the campus, met with some people, talked with a couple people I knew that were doing like base coding, and it just seemed like it would be a good fit. And then once I got in here and figured out that, my brain kind of worked that way, it was kind of the end of the story, and I've just fallen in love with it since then. Anybody else?
Yeah, if you share, you could talk about a year or so ago, shortly after you started, you shared a really good experience about an opportunity of learning. You share that experience again when you had that code transaction that you did. I think it really speaks to the character of being a software developer, taking ownership of your code and ownership of mistakes.
Yes. I'm going to see if I can remember to tell this the same way. So I mentioned working in clients production databases, which is their live actual database where all their stuff is moving. As they're getting stuff in, that data is going in and out. In SQL, there's a function for opening a transaction, which means that when you open that transaction, it's going to put a lock on that database. So that way you can pretty much control what comes in and what goes out. And you should not really do that in a client's production database, which I chose to do because I thought it would be the safest method. So I opened a transaction to make an update, and I forgot to close it, which then locked that entire client's production database, pretty much leaving them high and dry. Anything they were doing was just going into a pending state off in the ether, and it wasn't gonna fully transact until until somebody made the call. And so that led to kind of a Sev 1 fire that no one could kind of figure out what was actually happening against that client's database. And I think I was about 3 months into the company, and I had to fess up that it was me once I figured out what the problem was. And I got a pretty stern lecture about that, but from there I've made sticky notes that I have all around my computer monitor for different mistakes that I've made that let me know, if you open a transaction, you better close it. If you're going to do this, you need to log out. And it was a huge learning experience, and I honestly thought I was going to get fired and have to just move back to Portland at that point. That's probably true. Yeah, I didn't know what the problem was, and I spent a long time investigating it until I realized that it was me. It's just never fun.
So
looking for the person to blame.
Yeah.
So I'll actually remember the story
Yeah.
in more detail. Because when you shared it, you talked about how you had opened the transaction and then had moved on to another assignment.
Mhm.
The next day, they were calling in and saying our server wasn't running,
Mhm.
and you got assigned a ticket to fix it, and then you realized you were the problem.
I was the problem, yes.
And so I bring that up because it's really, I think it's a good testament to character, because as a software developer, you don't know everything. As we work through those challenges, you have to be willing to admit that when you make a mistake, you can say, hey, I made a mistake. I mentioned this last night in the presentation. It's better to be fired for making a mistake than to be fired for lying about making a mistake. And
That's true.
your character is something you need to stand by, and they need to be able to trust you. And so that story resonates, because what it basically means is that, yes, you might get fired, but it's better to be honest and upfront, because then you build trust. They know that if you're coding something and you know you made a mistake, you'll at least talk to them about it. And it's easier to address a problem if you know it's happening. If an employee doesn't bring it up, doesn't talk about it, and doesn't want to admit that he made a mistake, what ends up happening is the company is suffering through this whole situation, and they're not able to address it. If they know that it's happening, you can at least address it. You can't address it if you don't know what's happening. So being able to honest. Now, Cole could have easily, closed the transaction, slipped under the rug, I just thought I'd figure this out, I'd fix it. But if they found out that he lied, what would happen? You probably would have fired, right?
My company probably, yeah. They wouldn't have been happy with that.
Right. So, and most companies would. Most companies need to be able to trust their developers. They don't expect developers to be perfect. Now, if you crash your server and you cost the company $40 million, you're probably going to get fired. Again, it's still better to be fired for being honest than not. But the reality is that it's that strength of character to say, I made a mistake, here's what happened, here's what I'm going to do to make it doesn't happen again, and then move forward. So, that's all I like the story.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. And kind of to speak what Michael said about, especially with your first couple of years in the industry, with as much as you do learn from Tech Academy, you're not going to know, well, I guess depending on how much you actually dive in to a certain language, depending on where you get hired, you won't really know that much because, like my company, luckily when I started there, they are mainly SQL because everything we do is transaction based inside of databases. So I already knew a lot about it, but as I mentioned previously, I'd learned a lot just from reading people's codes, reading stuff on my own time to try and figure out why they did that. We also work in a .NET framework, and we learn a little bit .NET and ASP here. So there's always more that you're going to learn just from reviewing other people's code, and I highly recommend that on a regular basis. I used to go onto GitHub and look at other people's projects in code that I really enjoyed, just to see what was their approach, why did they do something that way. And sometimes, I've found myself, looking at other people's code and questioning, why did they do it that way? Could I do it better? And just, playing around with stuff. And it's always a worthwhile experiment to see if you can try and take someone's code and, tweak it a little bit, either performance-wise or even just to see if you have an idea like, hey, I would like to try it this way, why not try it? It's not going to hurt. Like, there's a lot of different methods and functions and built-in pieces of code out there that can always be used and improved. Everybody's got their own. Some people like for loops, some people like for each loops. It's going to all depend on, you know, what is actually going to be better for the application. And we also, like I'd mentioned, like be flexible. Like a lot of companies are pretty much, like if you get hired at a big company like Nike, they're going to be pretty, you know, standard to what they're going to be using. They'll probably be using a certain like web stack if you're going to work on their web, or if you're going to be working on like any of their mobile applications, they'll have a stack for that, and they probably won't change for like 10, 20 years until that code base becomes obsolete. And if you get hired at a small company like me, then you're going to have to learn a lot of different languages, and you have to pick them up fast. We jumped into JavaScript and XAML and Xamarin for iOS applications in a heartbeat, like overnight. We decided we wanted to build an iOS application. That's what we did. We all had to, you know, you could take it upon yourself and learn it, and move forward with that, or you could just leave yourself on the legacy application if you want to, you know, be that dev that just works on the .NET and VB structure, which would be really boring. Like, you don't want to just pigeonhole yourself and be that one guy that's going to take on the legacy products. You want to be able to diversify and adapt. Same thing with Node. We made a choice about 3 months ago to move some automated bots that we're building into a Node.js structure and run those. And so we've all been just, you know, picking up and learning Node, like really in depth. And it's so, you know, it's one of those things where you got to be flexible and versatile inside of a company. They're really going to appreciate that, because learning a new language, as a lot of you know, once you know the base of almost any language, it's pretty easy to pick up another one. They all have relatively the same structure. They all contain a lot of the same methods. You know, some use brackets, some use indentation. You know, those are usually the main differences. But being able to at least be willing to learn a new language is something that everybody's going to want to see. Any other questions? Yeah. Well, no, this is like inventory. So there are payroll sides of it where there are credit card transactions but this is like an entire company. So it would be their shipping and receiving departments, their payroll departments. It would be their inventory management. So as inventory comes in, we have to, you know, we log that inventory, and when it goes back out. Same thing with like process manufacturing. Like if you're going to make cookies, you have to be able to take, if you have a pile of flour and a pile of chocolate chips, you deduct a small portion of that. What's left over? What's now the cost of that? So it's very complex. It's not anything I ever was interested in or ever even knew existed in the world, and that's now kind of just my life. It's fun stuff though. Mm-hmm. For me, and from what I've seen, to the first part of your question, from what I've seen, like I don't have a computer sciences degree, and I only got into coding about 4 years ago. And I know that what I've seen when I was applying for jobs, where a lot of them say a CS degree or equivalent experience or something like that, and it's one of those things where how can you have equivalent experience if you're not given the opportunity? You know, just like when you get your first job when you're 16, how can you have previous experience if you can't get a job? And I think kind of like I touched on this a little bit earlier, what they're really looking for is more personality. They definitely want to see, even at the larger companies, they do want to see that you have that base skill set and a knowledge of, kind of a working knowledge of the foundation of a piece of code. But they also want to see, more or less I would say, they definitely want to see that you're going to be able to come into that team and you're going to blend. You're never going to be that outlier that takes a while to kind of come around and join in. You're not going to come in and try and shake things up, or you know, you're not going to just kind of be stubborn about learning or advancing certain products. And that's from what I've seen. And everybody at my company, like I mentioned, our junior developer is also from Tech Academy. He doesn't have a CS degree. Our dev team manager, he learned to code on his own. He started when he was probably like 17 or so. He was kind of just one of those guys that's super nerdy about that stuff. And he doesn't have a CS degree either. So at least for what I know of, I can only really speak to the Colorado, like Denver, Boulder region. Like They will put that on resumes, but that should never deter you from applying. It was on the when I applied for the job I have now, it was on there. It said CS degree or equivalent experience, and I applied anyways, and I got the job. And then the second part, as far as projects, I worked very hard on multiple different projects when I was here, whether or not it was on the live project team or if it was on individual products or even like core projects that we have here. You build like a calculator or something like that in Tech Academy, and then I would put all that stuff on GitHub because it doesn't hurt. Even my failures I put on GitHub. Though, like I'd like to show, like I built this really complex scientific calculator at one point, and I put like the first iteration up there, and then I have a little README file about what fundamentally didn't work about this, so then they can look at that, then see the second iteration and be like, how did he fix the problem? And so I was very diligent about my GitHub work, and so that's the best way to display your project, because it's like Facebook for your code, essentially. Like you can socialize, you can share, and you can put that link on your resume, and anybody's can just go take a brief glance. And like I said, some companies will have the whiteboard, like the whiteboard test, where they want you to come in and actually write down a piece of code or something like that. But I don't think that's the main thing they're looking for. They definitely want to see your other pieces of code, because I know that there's guys that have been in the industry for like 10 years and they hate the whiteboard tests. Nobody wants to go write an actual piece of code.
And I'll add to that too, to answer your question a little more in regards to this area, is that a lot of times they have a wish list. This is what we want to have. If you got a CSE gig, great. If you've got 5 years experience, great. If you walk on water, you're like, we got all these things. You look at this list, you're like, oh my gosh. The reality is the first question you should ask yourself is, do I feel like I can do that job? Can I do that? Can I put that job? And let me be perfect. Am I willing to do a shot at it? And if you think you can do the job, you feel like you can, bust your tail and really do it. And even that doesn't mean you have to know everything that's that. So they may have like 10 language items they want. They want C#, they want you to have HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and you know all but maybe 2 or 3 of those private technologies you're not familiar with. It's your willingness to learn that. And now, when you apply, you also be honest that here's what I know, and be honest about this, and you also research a little bit, not learn, but research about what's this language do. If you do that and you apply for it, the worst thing that happens is they'll call you. We've had many students hired where they've asked for a CS degree and they've overlooked it based on the person's ability. It's proven through their GitHub, through their interviews, through their visual assessment to do the job. Now, are they fully versed and go hit the ground running coding? Not necessarily. They hire them based on a lot of factors. So, yes, they would like to have a science degree. And quite frankly, if you go through the boot camp approach, once you get the boot camp and you get hired, it's to your advantage to then supplement your education and actually get a CS degree later on. OSU provides one for those that already have a degree. Like I have a history degree, Cole has a journalism degree. If you already have a degree, OSU has a 2-year program that takes it similar to a bachelor and lets them do a computer science in 2 years online. So you still eventually want to get that skill set. So the way to think about a boot camp is that we teach you the practical, hands-on experience of actually developing out your code and actually building code, kind of a trade. And then later on, as you want to advance to a mid and a senior, you need to get the fundamentals of the data structures and processes that computer science degree will do. And so it's basically what path do you want to go? Do you want to go the path of getting into the industry right away and build your way up and then automate your degree? Or do you want to spend 4 years to get a computer science degree? And then we've had students who literally have only got a 4-year degree in computer science, still can't hire because they get no experience. So they come into our school and get practical hands-on experience, build projects, actually solve problems, and they still get hired that way. So just because you have a science degree doesn't mean you're actually going to get hired. It's about the ability to show that you can come and deliver. And that delivery is both the technical, the basic, the fundamentals. Do you understand what a function is? Do you understand what a loop is? Do you understand the general ideas behind programming? And then be able to say, and then on the other side of the story, soft skills. If they hire you and you're very caustic or a wallflower, you're on 2 extremes, you're a liability to the company. So the other aspect is not only can you build and develop and learn and grow, and you can adapt, but you're also able to collaborate with people to make that happen. So there's a lot of fundamentals. The industry wants people that are competent and can collaborate. If you have those two things, you're going to have a good chance. We've had a number of students that are not hired through Facebook or the big companies, but a lot of small companies. Elementary, we have 5 of our students working there. We have Genesis Financial, we have 3 of them working there. We have 2 at this company in Boulder, Colorado, Cole and Mike Dixon, or Mike Finnegan. And so there's a number of people that are working in very good companies need developers. They don't have a huge budget to pay somebody $120,000 a year. So they're willing to give juniors a chance. So companies like Fred Myers, small companies that need people, they're willing to pay $60,000, $70,000 a year, which is a good salary for an entry-level position. But they want to make sure you're going to be able to adapt and learn and grow and make it receptive to feedback. And so there's a lot of smaller factors that play a bigger role in you getting hired. And it's not just like, I feel like after those times and programs that I do, well, what language should I learn? What's the most in demand? And the question is, do something you enjoy first. If you like Python, get strong with Python. If you want, ideally you want to do like a C# or a Java or some sort of major application language as well, but understanding and learning the fundamentals and being able to build things very comfortably in a given language gives you a starting point. And then when they whiteboard, oh, you know Python? Okay, well build me something like this in Python. Do things in Python. Build that in Python. That's a bigger factor of getting hired than whether you have this little piece of paper that says you were to school for 4 years, or even if you were to weekend. You could, if there are people that are really good and focused and actually can study themselves and get hired without even doing either college or working school. That's a little tougher. That's a lot tougher because you have no guidance. So it's a big, massive wall out there. It's a huge spectrum. And as Cole and I were talking about before the presentation, the reality is that there's a lot of hybrids. You know, don't assume that when you're getting a software developer, you're going to be a software developer. You could be a QA dev software developer where you have a marrying like both of those, where you can take some of your good skill sets and you've done from a previous industry and marry that into the field. I'll give you an example of why I think it's I'm so excited about building this degree. I had a student who had done some social media marketing background, and dabbled in HTML and was looking for a job, and had gone through 5 companies and I got hired. And the 5th company she was working through, she's like, that's my father's mic, and they want that security. What's going to happen? So, you know, nobody will call me. There you go. She applied for that position, and it was her prior unrelated industry that appealed to them, plus her experience at Tech Academy, and they gave her a shot. They gave her a 1-year contract. And so the recruiting firm brought her on board. They were basically a third party to the employer, and they hired her. She had no degree. She didn't qualify for what they wanted for their super wish list, but they still hired her. Within 6 months, she had worked hard. She worked collaborated with the team. They bought her out from the contract from the recruiting firm, and they brought her on board and gave her a raise. And she's still working there today. You're not guaranteed a job, but if you're willing to be adapted and work through it and work hard, because it wasn't like she sat around for 6 months and waited for them to give it to her. She had to prove it to her. Nights and weekends, she was studying. And I think that'd be a good next segment for you to go into. How about your experience and what you did after you got hired, and how you know, tried to cover the gaps that you had after? So like
Definitely.
You can't teach you everything.
Yeah.
What did you do to survive after this?
I kind of touched on a little bit of that, where like when I looked at other people's code and would review what other people at the company had done or try to figure out stuff like that. But I also took on when there were new challenges or new tasks presented, I would take those on. Definitely know your limits. Don't be the guy or gal that's always going to say, like, when a new project comes out, be like, yeah, I'll do that, I'll take this, and then just bog yourself down because you're being pointed in 1,000 different directions at this company. You know what your schedule has, what your skill ability is available for, and start to grab stuff. Especially like with me at a small company, it definitely shines through with the fact that you got the CTO and the COO both in the same office as you, and their CTO just stands at a desk in the middle of the office and just codes all day. So it's pretty easy when they come to you with a task and say, like, hey, we need someone to build this. You can be like, all right, yeah, I'll take that. And so taking on a lot of different projects and learning new avenues, stuff that is pretty intimidating. Like, I took over our original product that was built about 12 years ago when the company first started is built in Visual Basic, which is a very old archaic version of .NET. It's actually technically not even .NET, but it functions kind of similar. It's a Microsoft language. Super ugly and very hard to work with. And they needed someone to take over that old code base so that, you know, the CTO never had to look at that again. He could look at nothing but future products. And so I volunteered to do that, not knowing that, you know, granted, VB will never be anything that's going to advance my career at all. Like, no company's going to probably look to hire for VB. But at the same time, it was definitely something that was good to learn, just for the sole fact that it helped my problem solving across other arenas. So knowing kind of the basics of the code structure and being able to look at these problems, now I'm the only other one at the company that knows this language, which is beneficial in that regard, because that kind of demonstrated that I was willing to take on a challenge that, even though it was archaic and wasn't gonna, like, they knew it wasn't gonna, you know, help me in my career outside of that company, but just to demonstrate to them, like, he's willing to do this, he's willing to move forward on something that we're trying to even kill, but we have to, you know, keep around for probably the next 5 years, definitely helped. And there's things like that, like Mike Finnegan, the other guy from Tech Academy. We are building, like I've mentioned, our web application, our iOS-based application, and we needed someone to really improve our stack. It was fairly decent, but we needed some new pieces for reporting and stuff like that added in there, and he, you know, raised his hand and was like, let me do that. And it's taking the time to find what you can do and what you're willing to do. Never raise your hand for something that, you know, you're 100% doubt that, you know, you can do. Like, if you know that it's going to take you longer to learn it and figure it out than it would be to, you know, keep with other projects or maybe take something else, you know, don't slow down the production of the rest of the dev team. That was something I did struggle with as well, was the team dynamic and figuring out where, you know, because you need to know your strengths and your weaknesses on that dev team, because they already know theirs, and you walk in and you want to make sure that you can be productive and add to that team, but you never want to take away from the team's own overall productivity. And that's it takes a little bit of time to really analyze and figure out what, like, where you fit, what you can bring, you know, the pieces of your skill set that exceed or match the rest of the dev team. And, you know, the team dynamic is something that Tech Academy is actually really good at teaching me, for the sole fact that I worked on 2 or 3 live projects, I believe, and the first one was when I really got the feel for what it's like to work on a dev team with broken out pieces of a project. Because up until then, you know, you're pretty much coding your own little applications, you're solving your own problems, you're doing your own tutorials, but then you get on a team where it's like, all right, you two are building the front end, you guys are building the database connection, and you guys are modifying the database, and then you guys all have to take your pieces and work together, is where it does seem to get a little hairy. But I found that I kind of thrive in that more of that area now. Like, I can't imagine working on stuff by myself anymore. I love to have people review my code to build something, and just have another dev be like, hey, you know, take a look at this really quick, and they'll just come over, glance at it, and be like, yeah, that looks great.
Do you ever work on, like, totally unrelated stuff at night?
Yeah.
On your own computer?
Yeah, I'm building so I have a Raspberry Pi and a touchscreen monitor, building a interactive, like, tie-in with Google Calendar stuff, because I have, like, a whiteboard calendar that I always write stuff on. So I figured, you know, why not get up with the times and build myself a touchscreen calendar that I can just have tied to my Google events and stuff like that. So yeah, there's stuff like that I work on. I was playing around with the Unity engine for a while, just seeing what I could do with, like, games and things like that. I'm not really much, I love playing video games, but I'm not much for building them. Like, there's some really cool stuff. I definitely recommend, like, any of those things. Like, if you guys play around with a Raspberry Pi, they cost, you know, you can go get yourself a really cheap one and just code on it for a little bit. You can build some really impressive things with those little guys. And yeah, same thing with, like, if you're interested in games, yeah, like the Unity engine, it's pretty much almost like cut and paste. Or if you guys work on Macs, get Xcode. It's their free IDE. It's essentially Visual Studio for Mac, but it works on their code base, which I believe is Objective-C, is what they build all their iOS applications in. But you can build other languages in there, and it's just a fun way to, you know, you can, especially with Xcode on Macs, you can build it and render it directly into a simulated iOS device, so you can just see exactly what you're building at the time you're building it. Like, there's tons of fun tools out there. You know, there's little like JS engines that you can build online where you can build your code and then click run, and it'll show you exactly what your JS does. So yeah, never stop tweaking with that stuff. Like, it's a lot of fun.
I'll add two things to that. Number one,
Yeah.
in regards to the learning old languages, baby boomers are reaching their retirement age, and there's a lot of stacks, or stacks that corporations need. So if you want to kind of, broaden your horizon as you develop out, learning COBOL, which is a huge banking industry language, being willing to learn some new languages means that number one, you may need to learn a language to help to transfer that to a newer stack or newer ability. So the willingness to learn always has to be important. And number two, we have a Unity meetup here.
Oh, nice.
Unity PDX. It's a meetup that happens the third Thursday of every month. So January 3rd Thursday. Yeah, so if you're interested in seeing it, they basically do presentations on people's different projects and stuff where they actually use C#. So one reason why we host Unity PDX is that we actually teach C#, and Unity is actually based on C#. So that's the augmented reality and the virtual reality stuff. So if you want to see it,
Where do you do that at?
right here.
Right here.
You can just stay here, dude, and just, study away.
That's crazy. Long before I ever knew Tech Academy, I was thinking about coming to that.
Yeah, and we actually have it right here.
Oh, sick. I can go learn Unity in Portland. This sounds like
That's right, yeah. And the speed from your school to there is about 10 feet, I think.
yeah. That's sick. That does.
That's right. So maybe so the point is that those are the two things. Be
Hmm.
adaptable. It was that scheme I was talking about, also about Sylvia. She was adaptable. She was the one that, and don't, if you, like I said, the first thing you do for a job resume, can I do the job? Or am I willing to learn to do that job? If you answer yes to that question, apply for it. The worst is they're going to say is not calling you. Now, if they ask for a PhD, apply for it. If they ask for 10+ years of experience, then I probably would hesitate. But anything under 5, 6, 7 years of experience, I would apply for it. If you feel you can do the job, apply for it. It takes 10, 15 minutes to send in their resume. The worst that's going to happen is they don't call you. If Sylvia never applied, she would be working on a job and loving what she does.
I read an article in Wired magazine too that was saying that like a lot of smaller companies and a lot of larger companies today are actually starting to prefer more of the boot camp method because boot camps are flexible.
Yep.
So if tomorrow's C# is yesterday's code, boot camp will quickly switch to new. But like in academia, you've got professors that have been teaching the same. They have the curriculum, they have their classes that they're using. It's like pulling teeth trying to get them to modify curriculum. It's go through the board. Takes a long time, so a lot of companies are like, hey, these guys are teaching exactly what's going on today. Whereas like a CS degree teaches you this is what's happened through the entire history of computers. You know what I mean? So there's like distinctive, it's just like different viewpoints or
Definitely.
different confidence.
So share, can you share a little bit more about the actual day? What's a day-to-day like for you?
Yeah.
Do you guys use Agile Scrum? What's the actual day-to-day like?
So we do use a Scrum process. We use it pretty lenient. Bigger companies are definitely more rigorous in their Scrum. My brother actually is a project manager over at Nike, and so he's Scrum Master and everything. So they're very into their Scrum over there. We use Scrum methodologies, so it definitely helps us organize. We also use websites such as Target Process and Jira to help us organize our daily tasks and kind of give an overview to the team, because we have multiple teams. We have a consulting team, a dev team, a support team, and so having them be able to see what dev is actually doing will definitely help with projects if they need to come at us with anything. So like my normal day-to-day is we have a Scrum 2 days a week for the dev team. We have a company Scrum that happens once a month just because we're so small. There's no point in pulling everybody aside for like half an hour every single day. And I usually come in the morning. I'm an early bird, so I get there at like 7:30. But I usually come in and I'll just review whatever came into our ticket desk as far as escalation points. An escalation point would be anything that support just can't do. And we're actually trying to train our support team to do some more dev work, so that way we don't get as much. But Anything that's just past their skill set will come to Mike Finnegan, and anything past him will come to me. So I'll just review that, see what I can find, and then from there it's picking apart projects. I usually will have a lot of different projects, customizations that clients are specifically asking for, like the software doesn't do this, why doesn't it do that, can we have it do this? And so then it's scoping it out, building it to the client's requirements, and then testing it and shipping it out to them. Some of those projects can take 6 months, some of them you can knock out in an afternoon. I also try to get as much time as I can working on our Forward project, which is the iOS-based warehouse management software. And so getting even like an hour to push the project forward is a huge help to the dev team, because they're all stretched doing their own other projects. We have one guy who's pretty much focused on getting this new product to market, but we also need other people that can kind of come in along the way and nitpick little pieces away from it and say, like, this piece needs to still be built. Who can do that? You just kind of come in, accept it, just slice it off, build it, put it back into the product. And so it's I don't have a standard day-to-day, which I think is probably normal for most companies, unless you're working on like a long scope project, say like you have a 6-month deadline, then your day-to-day is probably going to be mapped out for you pretty well. Mine, I get to be pretty flexible, which is awesome about a smaller company, is, if I want to work on a client's project that day, I can. If I'm hitting a wall and I don't want to work on it anymore, I got about 6 or 7 other things that I can dive into that day, which is always awesome. Having a backlog and having versatility to just kind of choose what I want to do on a normal day is really fun. There are those days, of course, where I don't get a choice and I'm stuck and I'm locked into a single project for a day, a week, a month, and that gets really monotonous. But it's just one of those things that in the dev industry, you're going to have those days where you get to dictate whatever you want to do, and then you're going to have those days where you're going to be locked into something, and that's just what you're going to, it's just finding the balance. And another thing I would point out is working on any project. You guys have probably already encountered some of this here, where you're writing a piece of code and you're just banging your head against a wall. You can't make that piece of code work, and you've read over it, you've looked at it, you've thrown it into like Visual Studio and looked for missing brackets and stuff, but you just can't get it to work. Happens to me all the time. Best thing I can suggest is step away for like 10 minutes. Even maybe a little bit longer. Go work on something else. If you're building, say you're building like a complicated switch statement for a .NET project and you just can't get it to work, there's nothing saying that you can't go work on something else. Go, don't even think about switch statements. Start building something else. Move on to a different step and come back, because it's that staring at the code, it just turns into Occam's razor, where you know what the problem is, but you've looked past it 1,000 times. And it's every dev deals with that on a day-to-day basis. So that's just one thing I would definitely point out to everyone is don't stress over it, just take a moment and walk away. Like I work on a loop, and sometimes I'll just go out and walk the loop, and literally it comes to you in the middle of whatever you're doing. You're just like, there it is. That's what I'm missing. So that's something that I was taught when I started at this company, was because I would spend like half the day looking at a bug, trying to solve it, and eventually the rest of the dev staff was like, you can just step away. You don't have to work on this all day. You can move on to other things. Because when I started, I was under the impression that if I was given something, it needed to be done and returned. It's most companies, I'd say probably about 80% of dev companies aren't that way. Like, they will want it returned probably in a prompt fashion, but it's not like they gave you that's all you're working on, and then you send it back and you take the next thing out of the queue. If you can balance working on 6 different projects at once, definitely do that. Like, it's not only going to help you, but it's going to help the company you're working for.
Can you give us some examples of whiteboard tests that you had?
Yeah, so I did have a whiteboard test for one company that had to do with, what was it? It was garbage collection in C#, where stuff goes out of scope and then gets taken away. And I actually really struggled with that because I didn't know how to write anything related to garbage collection. I know what the concept is, and I know how to explain it, but I don't even remember what I wrote for that one. I just remember that I think I started writing the scope of certain variables inside of certain methods, but I didn't know how to fully illustrate the function of garbage collection, but I explained it to them. I didn't get that job, but I hope that wasn't the reason. But that was probably the one that stands out most to me. There was another one where it was kind of an iteration method where you had to, so they wanted kind of like a for loop, or so they were like, and have it, have the for loop populate every time it's an odd number or every time it's a prime number. So you had to be able to write, they kind of wanted just to see the problem solving method of it. There's a million ways to write that piece of code. They wanted to see how you would write it specifically. So that one was a little frustrating, but they gave you time. So with those whiteboard ones, it was never like in the middle of the interview. They just said, hey, go write us this. They gave you, they walked out of the room and gave you like 15, 20 minutes. The longest one I had was they gave me like half an hour to kind of collect myself, because I don't think they would expect anyone to, for them to just say, write me a for loop that's going to ping on every prime number and go do it now. Like, most devs don't work that way. Like, in the dev industry, it's a really interesting fact that a lot of people, take pride in their typing speed and all that kind of stuff. Typing speed really doesn't make much of a difference, for the sole fact that you're writing probably about 3 lines of code, and then you're reading those lines of code and testing those lines of code. It's not like the movies where somebody's just typing and writing an entire application. They would never expect, I would hope that any company interviewing would never expect for them to just say, solve this problem, and have you go write it down. I know some companies will have a problem already on the board, and we used to do this at Tech Academy for a little while during some of our meetings, where like there would be a problem on the board and there would be something missing or wrong with it, and we'd just give somebody a chance, everybody get a chance to look it over, and maybe somebody would be like, yeah, I can solve that. And usually it's like a missing bracket, or something is just fundamentally wrong with the structure of it, and they could just come up and change a couple things. So yeah, those are the standard ones. I know, I do know for a fact, because I have a couple friends that work at Amazon. Amazon is very, very hard with theirs. Like, they will give you 2 days in advance and then expect you to come in and whiteboard a problem, because their whiteboard problems, even for junior devs, are really insane. Yeah.
What's your average work week with the startup? I heard that startups can work a lot.
Yeah, they definitely can. It's also pretty flexible on like what you kind of want to do. So my average work week is it is Monday through Friday. I work from home on Fridays, and I take usually like a half day on Thursday if I feel like it. But I'm usually there from 7:30 in the morning till about 5 at night. The hours are 9 to 5, but I just wake up early, and I just also work late. So they're pretty flexible on a lot of that. A lot of startups are definitely 10-hour days. Some of them will stretch into the 12-hour day, and it all depends on the products you have, the products you're trying to build, and the size of your dev team is really what it comes down to. When I first started, I was the only other developer on the team, so there's 2 people. And so when I first started, my first year and a half there was about 12-hour days, and I think it's just been ingrained in me at this point that it's just like, we'll just do a 10-hour day, I don't mind. But yeah, I do know for a fact from friends that work at them that, yeah, a lot of them are 10, 12-hour days. But you also get some pretty cool perks at startups. Like, I know a lot of places let you take naps every day, which is an awesome perk. Anybody else?
Can you describe what's your office look like?
It's an open office format. We do have it's an open office format. It's not a very big office, but we do have kind of like a divider that runs down the middle. It's only about like to here on me if I were standing up. So we do have a divider that runs down the middle, but that's just because that came with the office, so we just haven't removed it. And then we have kind of a support side and a dev side, just because it's a little bit easier, so everybody on the support side can talk to each other. And then I have a standing desk. We have if you want one, you can have a standing desk. I have the one that goes up and down, Bear desk. And then we're not blocked in at all. I have, I got my junior dev right in front of me. I got my senior dev to the side. I got our UI UX guy over here, and it's just open format. We, we talk and banter all day. We'll play music.
So there's a lot of chatter.
Oh yeah.
But if you want to really focus, you can just throw your headphones in or something.
Oh yeah. So there's definitely we'll have guys that'll play music in the office. If it gets annoying, you can just be like, hey man, don't do that, or you can just pop your headphones in. But yeah, no, there's a lot of chatter. Everybody, everybody's really friendly with each other, and you got everybody talking back and forth. There's beers on Fridays and stuff like that. It's a pretty relaxed environment, which is the standard, I think, for almost any dev company at this point. It's the Google model, where they want to really they want their employees to want to come to work. So they'll bring in like foosball tables, or we'll go out and do like, we went and did paintball a little while ago, just as a team for a team building exercise. So yeah, we just went and did that. Yeah, exactly. So it's a very kind of relaxed model, but everybody gets their work done. So it's never. I think that is another adjustment if you're not working or used to working in an environment like that. You got to be able to kind of find your balance between like, when you really need to just put your head down and get your work done versus when you can just kind of relax and go hang out and play video games with other people type thing. Yeah.
And are you ever like afraid of asking too many questions or having someone ask you too many questions?
Not at all.
Like time-wise, is that ever concern you?
Let's see. When I first started, that was something that I did a lot. I was under the impression I could never ask too many questions, and I think I was right, at least in that regard. I asked a lot of questions about almost everything, even if it was something that I thought I understood. I wanted to get the company's view on it, or a senior dev's view on it. And nowadays, I'm trying to kind of pass that on to any junior devs or new support people we hire, QA engineers, because I feel like that is, outside of getting your hands dirty, that is one of the best ways to learn. Like, you're not going to know otherwise, what is the company's standard approach for, tackling this kind of problem? What is the answer we give to a client when we encounter something like this? And it's, I did ask my CTO, I think about 6 months after I started, whether or not I was bothering him with too many questions, because, he's the most busy guy on the dev team, and he said no. And I know that I was asking a lot. So it probably changes from company to company, but I think like the mark of any really good dev team that you're on is they're going to be willing to answer your questions. Like I still ask questions to our senior dev all the time. I build products, or I'm building a project that he doesn't understand, and he'll come to me. So it's just kind of it's a very cyclical thing, and keeping that, it's a lot of tribal knowledge at any company. So it's going to be, you want to pick up on as much of it as you can. You never want to be leaving yourself on one product, especially if your company's got multiple platforms and products. You want to be able to at least touch on all of them. So, worst case scenario, the rest of the dev team has food poisoning. You can step up and handle any single one of those projects that needs attention, and that goes a long way. Yeah. You got nothing else?
Well, I was going to say,
yeah.
we can probably not be covered.
It's all good.
So you don't work on Fridays, you work from home.
Yeah, I work from home on Fridays.
When are you going to start working from home on Thursdays?
Eventually. Most of we're based in Boulder. I live in Longmont. I got tired of living in Boulder after about a year and a half there. And then it's, Longmont is just like 15 minutes north of Boulder. And then we got guys that live in Loveland, which is about another 20 minutes from there. And so, our CTO, our senior dev, our UI UX guy, they're only in the office Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We have other guys that are only in the office, 2 days a week. Like some of our managers only come in 2 days a week. We have, our CTO is pretty chill, and he's got a really good philosophy. Like, if you can get your work done at home, just do it at home. Like, you don't need to be in the office 5 days a week unless you feel it's necessary to your own productivity. And I just like being in the office 4 days a week, just because it's easier when the support guys need assistance, or since we're working on some pretty profound projects for clients that I have my hands on, that it's just easier for me to just be there 4 days a week. I'll probably end up switching to the Monday, Wednesday, Friday model eventually. Just not.
Well, do you think your company, theoretically, let's say, they just shut down the office, just like everyone set up your own office at your house, could you guys still produce?
Oh yeah.
Efficiency?
We have one product that we only have one developer for. He's not even in the office. He came into the office when we hired him. He's actually based out of New Hampshire right now, and so he works from home, 24/7, and he runs that whole product for us. And exactly. So we have like a Slack channel, so we can always reach him directly, or he can ping us as like our dev group on the Slack channel. We also have our Scrum, so if you need stuff that needs attention, we have our Scrums twice a week. And then, and then we have, just open lines of communication. We all have our direct lines. We all know our numbers. There's been times where we just have, started like a dev conference call and just left it open as we're all working on our own products if anybody needed anything. So it's, we're really open with our work from home policy, which I think is another mark of a pretty good company to work for. Is if you can do your job from home, there's no reason that you should have to drive into the office. Like for as small of a company as we are, the people that work in the Colorado office, which is about half the company, are the only ones that live in Colorado. The rest are all remote. So half our company is, we got them in Montana and California and New Hampshire, a guy in Florida. It's just, we just look for those people that have the personality that would fit, and you can kind of tell. Like, you definitely want to make sure that that person's actually going to be doing work from home, because that is kind of a huge trust point, whether that person's actually going to go home and actually do any work.
Do you have any women?
Yeah, we have quite a few actually. A lot of my higher ups are actually women. On our dev team, we don't have anybody currently. We had a woman that was on our dev team, and she moved on to a different company. But my project manager is a woman. Our consulting manager is a woman. Like, everybody, it's a fair balance. I think it's still in favor of men at this point at the company, but we're trying to shift from that, especially in the Boulder area, because there's a lot of talent out there.
I was I thought I was going to say.
Yeah.
In regards to the being afraid to ask questions, one way to think about it is a couple of things. Generally a good rule of thumb is about 15 minutes. This 15 minutes allows you the time to try and solve the problem and figure out different approaches. And if after 15 minutes you can't solve it, you can at least go to somebody and say, hey, this is what I've tried. Here's how I tried to approach it. This is what I've learned so far on stuff. And the reason why you don't want to stick your wheels past that point is you're wasting a lot of time. The other thing is that there's a difference between knowing a language and knowing the implementation of that language. So, for example, you may know how Python, you understand Python, but a company may have implemented Python in a specific way that is, got some duct tape on it, got some other code coming into it, and you're not going to know exactly why or how they did something. So if you're afraid to ask, you're not going to know if it's something that you wouldn't even know. There's some situations where you get to a quick piece of code that you're just not going to know, and there's no way you would know because it's the way they implemented it. They're doing some sort of funky thing with the code that is specific to their company and their business needs. So I think the main thing is you're not asking the same questions over and over again. If they say, if you ask this question, you keep asking the question, you don't write it down, you don't make it remember, you don't learn, and you're like a broken record, that would be a problem. And then if you go to them and say, hey, I think this can work, and you've never even made an attempt to figure out how it works and understand it a little bit, to basically tell them, hey, here's the effort I went through to try to figure it out, and can you help me kind of, break this down, or this process? Oh, yeah, well, you just do this right here. And maybe some of you should start with data testers, and maybe you have a teachable moment where they teach you something. So the challenge is having the courage to get in this. You don't know something, you don't know it. And you can spend 2, 3, 4 hours working on something when it was just a simple little thing that you couldn't have known. So, after 15 minutes, you're wasting time. Maybe 30 minutes. And you talk to your seniors and say, hey, how long is everyone working before you get comfortable to ask about it? Maybe that was 20 minutes. Maybe it's something to do with 10 minutes. You can't figure it in 10 minutes? Come see me. Each company has a different approach. And then it just makes you that much stronger. You have to admit ignorance, because quite frankly, you don't know everything. And who here knows everything?
Yeah, don't be afraid to Google. That's like, I will spend, working on new projects. I Google stuff all the time. That's what it's there for. No company's going to block it or dock you for not using it or anything like that. It's the best tool out there. Every dev Googles. There's no dev out there that's writing all his code and not Googling for better ways to do something, or to be like, or encounters something and goes, I don't even know what this is doing, and then kind of looks up key phrases. Just do it.
I'd also recommend that try and go to the primary resource. If you're trying to do Python, go to python.org. If you're trying to do MSADN, Google, python.org, list comprehension or something, whatever you're looking for, but go to the primary resources first before you go to the forums. At least try and learn and figure out, well, how is this post going? The primary resources are going to be IT, because at least they'll teach you about the fundamentals. Because somebody on Stack Overflow could be like, yeah, I coded this out, it works, and it does work, but maybe it's not that best practice. And so use those as a last resort, but try to get into the documentation and figure out how to do it. It may not give you the answer you need, but you understand the fundamentals behind it, at least you get a little bit stronger in that.
Is it tacky to ask a question about proprietary software if you're a company on something like Stack Overflow? Hey, I'm doing this for my job for a piece of actual client software.
I've found a lot of stuff out there that is similar, but no, I wouldn't say it's bad. I think it would also depend on how much of the code you actually post, because if it's proprietary, you don't want to give away too much. But if it's like, if like you're having problems with like a certain method, just extract that method. And be like, do you guys see anything wrong with this? Like, what's happening? Like, I've never I haven't had to post anything on Stack Overflow, luckily, but I've come close to it just because there's times where it's just, it's like I can't figure this out. Sometimes you also get trolls on Stack Overflow, which is a problem. Yeah. Oh, that's a great resource. I use it all the time.
Also, another thing I'm very conscious about is the fact that there's a story that Brent Wilson, one of our guest speakers, who comes and does a series probably this coming January. He does a series on security protocol. He shared a story on this government agency that actually, one of the dev team had posted a Google Doc and it had their code base, how to get into this government healthcare system.
Wow,
all
well done.
Stack Overflow, and he saw it, and one of his doctor students saw it, and Dr. Wilson, and he goes, oh shit. So he actually called up that department and said, you realize that you have HIPAA requirements. You realize that you've given away, if anybody that happens to know what they're looking at can access your system and all your employees, they have all the things they need to get into it. And the person had no idea. Here's this doctor calling, Dr. Wilson from Fox University, calling them saying, by the way, on this page is your entire security structure that gives them access to it. And the person had shared a Google Doc and tried to ask them to their code on Stack Overflow. So be very conscientious that if you have the keys to the castle, that you're not putting the keys out there on the other people's time. So,
Definitely.
Unless you really want to violate every law, especially if you're working for a government agency. So.
How long each day got you working in Tech Academy were you working on stuff?
I had the benefit of living in Portland, so I was able to come here 5 days a week. So I was usually here about, I think doors opened at like 8. I was usually here about 8:30 in the morning and left about 4, 5 o'clock. And I was just head to the books all day. And then when you get into some of the later courses, or even the latter half of each individual language you learn, it goes from less like technical language of learning the definitions of things like that, and you start to get into the bigger projects for each one, like HTML, building pages and things like that, and incorporating CSS. So I would spend pretty much, there was days, like especially on Python, where I'd spend like an entire day just working on a Python project. I always wanted to make sure, for my learning process, I just wanted to make sure I got it right and I knew what I was doing. And that was just my way of learning it. Some people can blow through a language really fast and, take to it like fish to water. But for me, it took a little bit more. So that was, I was here standard job hours, I think, was what I did. I worked, and when I worked here, teaching students, I had students that were remote or on campus. And we had students that were here part-time, and I think it just depends on how much, some people learn really fast, some people don't, and then it's how much you're willing to put into it. Like we had students that were here part-time that, knew way more than me by the time they left. Like it's. And if you ever get stuck, like I know that, like Adam still works here and Kendra still works here. Like our instructors know a hell of a lot, which is pretty impressive. Like I know a lot of some of the other boot camps around town, like they're, what is it? They're more like junior devs themselves, where they just kind of take on, like, they just learned it on their own type situation, and they don't fully understand like the syntax or structures. They're like, oh, I just know how to do something.
Any other questions? Good.
How do you get job performance?
It seems to be on like kind of like a yearly basis. So that's, I think the most dev teams are on a yearly basis, and I'm not fully sure how they choose to evaluate it. When I've had my meetings, they'll point out like, my contributions to the team as a whole, or on certain projects or products that I'm working on. I think they definitely, since the company's pretty small, they definitely, they do have, the higher ups have an oversight of my interactions with clients. If I'm building custom applications, they'll get feedback from the client, or, if the client's being specifically difficult, they'll have heard about it by the time I'm done with the project. But I think with my company, it's just kind of being able to see the impact of what the dev's done. And at a small company, it's pretty easy to gauge the impact of like, to say, if they were to remove me from the dev team, how far would they be at this point, type thing. At a bigger company, I couldn't honestly say, but at a company of my size, yeah, I think it's just being able to see, like, if I had not joined the team, where would they be?
Alright.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and go ahead. If you want to ask any of the questions, feel free to take it from the board and ask questions. Thank you for coming today. We appreciate it. Before you leave, you could be a moment to fill out a survey. We greatly appreciate it. If you want to learn more about the thing, just put yes on question 3, and then somebody will contact you and share more information about pricing and about the school and the details. Or you come and ask me about it as well. So again, if you're coming in, and again, Cole's here to answer any additional questions you may have. Of course. So warm up on
Yeah. Question, so I really enjoyed your talk, by the way. It's fantastic. I am a graphic designer looking to venture into professor career with UI area. So right now, I'm like kind of unsure whether I want to go into like coding or UI or UX. Working at your current UI and UX person at work. Qualities do you find that you really either like about them, or like what skill sets do you find as a programmer that you like them to know, that like where you guys are going to start working really well together?
So our UI and UX guy, we hired about a year ago. He's the first UI UX guy the company's ever had, and we got him for our iOS project just because we kind of, as devs, and you being a graphic designer, you know that ugly UI when you see it. Like devs, we don't. We're just like, hey, it works. It looks fine. And so having someone be able to kind of come in and have like kind of a strong backbone, being able to stand up to, especially a dev, because a dev just builds something, and if it works, it works. That's all we really care about. So having someone that can kind of come in and fundamentally point out